I walked into Signal Hill Library and I walked up to the circulation desk. And I probably had this look of, I don't know what to do. And this incredible woman said to me, how can I help you? And I share this story when I'm talking to other people starting practices because I can remember hearing, how can I help you? And then I was able to say what it was that I didn't even know what I was wanting, but here's what I've graduated with. This is what I want to be able to do, who I want to be able to visit. And I remember her following up by saying, I can help you. And there's something about when someone says that to you in earnest, that they can help you, that I will carry for the rest of my life. And I hope that I can offer that to as many people as possible. So she did. She pulled out this blue book. And these blue books, prior to computers, had the names of all of our agencies serving all ages of social needs, so a full list, and who the executive director was, who the program coordinator was, what the address is, and you weren't allowed to take that book out. And in my case, I didn't have the 10 cents for the photocopy machine, right? So what do? You go in with your piece of paper and your pencil, and you begin your very first business journal, and you write out all of these places that you could potentially introduce music therapy to. And I made 3 phone calls, and the third phone call said, what are you doing Friday?
Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 121. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Before we get into it, I need a bit of an ask. If you listen to the show or enjoy the show, I've been asking people to share it, but now I'm going to ask people to subscribe and review it. So I'm going to flip it on its head. So if you're listening, please do that. Today's guest, this is an intro from Todd Hirsch. And when I asked Todd, I'm like, do you know anybody that would be great on the show? And right away he said yes. So I'm pumped for this one, so please name and who you are.
I am Jennifer Buchanan. I am the president and founder of JB Music Therapy right here in Calgary.
Amazing. And just based on our off-camera conversation, I can't wait to get into this one. Have you seen any of these? Did you see Todd's?
I did.
Pieces of?
I watched pieces of, okay. For sure.
Good. So you have a little bit of context for what's about to happen. So I love the guests to go back as far as they want to go. So back to their childhood, how they grew up, where they grew up, what inspired them. Your musical path will be your musical interest will be very interesting for me to hear. But just take it as far back as you want to go, and then we'll wind our way up to where you are today.
It sounds a bit like therapy, eh?
Well, it's funny you say that because on occasion, after I turn off these cameras, people say that exact same thing.
Yeah, I could see that. An opportunity to reflect on one's own life doesn't happen all the time. It's nice just to have people that are hopefully interested in learning more. I normally start around my music therapy career and where that happened, which happened pretty early as well. But I rarely get to go back to how'd you become an entrepreneur? How'd you become a musician? And I remember so many moments where that's where this went, what was happening. And so I can even go back to let's go back to grade 2.
Perfect.
And just way back. And I remember in grade 2, we had a regular music teacher. Do you remember those? And she would sit at the piano, and it was always very fun and lively and boisterous, and we would sing along, and she would teach us songs. And then all of a sudden, she would have to leave for the second half of the school year. We never knew why. And we got this new teacher that came in, and his name was Mr. Trudia. And Mr. Trudia came in, and he, instead of turning towards the piano, he brought a guitar and sat on the piano bench towards us. And you felt the shift. And he sang grown-up songs. He sang the words that were coming out of the Cold War and the Vietnam War of the time, which quickly has given away my age. And he taught us while they were fairly new, blowing in the wind. Like blowing in the wind, fairly new. One Tin Soldier, brand new, coming out. And so he was teaching us these grown-up songs that our parents were starting to listen to on a radio, and getting us to think. And I can remember feeling so connected to those songs. I can tell you today, lyrics are not an easy thing for me to absorb still today. But I remember every one of those songs because of the deep connection to the way he presented it, how he introduced it, how he taught us, and how he made me feel. And I realize a lot of that has led into now my work. I do have to talk about Granny and Granddad, though, because this was pivotal. So after giving an opportunity in public school to learn guitar, every public school should have guitar lessons and music outlets for kids, and not even those that are just at that high level, musical ability, but those that just want to touch instruments and play with them. What came out of that was me going to long-term care for the first time after Granddad, at the age of 62, had a stroke and unable to walk, unable to talk. And he, and it was my first time there. I don't know if people remember their first time in a setting like that. Yeah, it's something, hey?
Yeah, my dad's mom, my granny, was in a assisted living place for a long time. She had rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
So just like in a wheelchair forever. Yeah. Hands were just, just almost like knuckles all the time. So
right.
I walked in there at a young age too. And it's a different feeling.
And those people were young at one point, right?
For sure.
Like, and now here we are. And that's how it was with Granddad up till that moment of seeing him for the first time. He was tough. He was tough and strict and all those things.
All the rules.
And now all of a sudden he's not walking and talking. So within days, right? So it was Granny that asked me to bring my guitar in and sing to Granddad. And I say often, these things sound so simple. They're rarely easy. Granddad was miserable prior to his stroke. Now he's extra miserable. And singing for him, the amount of nervousness I felt, and also just thinking that he would write it off as nothing important. Yeah. And here I am now singing Granddad's favorite song called White Cliffs of Dover, out of the UK, popular during World War II. Vera Lynn sang it to the troops. And in that moment, the screaming lady down the hall, which there's always the screaming lady, got closer and closer, and we recognized she was singing all the words to the song, and came and sat down in the room. And the wandering guy, who makes you a little nervous because they're so quiet, but they wander and wander and wander, also came into the room and able to pull up a chair. And this motley crew of a miserable Granddad and a screaming lady and a wandering guy and a broody teenager, all in one room. I'm all of probably 12 years old. And we're connecting. And it would be about, lots of things happened after that. I love doing projects. If anyone has a project right now they want to work on, just call me. I love projects.
Where'd the before you go, where'd the musical background come from? Like at such a young age.
Yeah.
Was it around you, or did your parents or somebody in your life just like expose you to it?
I love that you asked me that. No, it wasn't around me at all. Anyone else out there that has a quiet home where music isn't a big part, the music was still there for me. My ear always picked up to the radio in a feeling way. I loved talking about music at school from a young age. Public school was big. I also learned ukulele and also learned clarinet by grade 5. Like I was really attracted to this opportunity. And also I remember when we got our first $500 piano into the house and Mr. Nickelwitz, true name, came in with his fedora hat and he would never teach me Royal Conservatory, but instead would throw up a piece and say, okay, play that. And it was never perfect. And he goes, that was great. And then he'd throw up another piece. And so I learned about the imperfection of learning music and that it was purely for feelings and a good time. And so I never, it's such an interesting thing that you asked me that, because at times I have felt as a fraud within the industry because I am so not perfect in it. Mm. But I feel a lot of that has allowed me to recognize in my clients and the people we work with their imperfection, not only in being a human being, but also in music. But that doesn't mean it can't still be the playground to play in. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How'd the piano get into your house? Like, did your family realize that you were way into this and started giving you opportunities?
They did, and it was I believe it was highly recommended from somebody else in the family. I don't think my parents would have necessarily brought it in, and so when it arrived, it was extra special. This was the time where money was tight, and shortly after that, my parents would divorce and money became even tighter. So you felt the privilege of having a piano in the home. And now look at today. Hey, so many people are trying to get rid of their pianos and can't find homes for them. It's crazy how things have changed.
We got a piano in our house and I can't remember where it came from. And my mom I have a younger brother, younger sister, put all three of us in piano lessons. And our teacher was in the same cul-de-sac up in Strathcona. So we'd literally walk across the street and get piano lessons. And we were all pretty young. Like, this is probably, I don't know, 9 to 12, 9 to 13, taking piano lessons.
Right.
But I don't know where that piano came from. I'll have to ask my mom.
Yeah.
It's still in their house. Yeah. And I don't know what we're going to do.
Do you remember your first teacher too?
I remember my teacher, I can't remember her name. I can see her in junior high, like music class. Mm-hmm. And the teacher across the street, I can't remember her name. I didn't really enjoy it a lot.
Right.
Mom said I was half decent at it, but I don't know.
As soon as it became performance for me, I didn't always like it as much. When you had to get it perfect. As soon as it had to be perfect, I didn't enjoy it as much.
The pressure, or just like what part didn't you like?
Yeah, maybe it was the pressure. It was the once you get it perfect, maintaining it at perfection. I think that's the hardest part. Sure, you can hit it perfect once in a while, but maintaining that level of perfection, it's a tough. I
like the imperfection idea.
It
sounds very like comforting and like fun, actually.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're 12 years old, playing to an audience in a assisted living place. Mm-hmm. So what happens after that?
Yeah, so that's when school.
Sorry, where'd you grow up?
I know. I was thinking, we might be thinking I'm living in Calgary. I was in Langley, British Columbia at the time. And the move out here, we'll get there.
For sure.
But no, I was still in Langley. And outside of grade 8, which was just such a transition year in British Columbia, that's when your first year of junior high is grade 8.
Yep.
Grade 8 was a little rough, but 9 forward, I loved school. I really loved it. And I know that's not always common to have loved those years. It was anchoring to a best friend by the name of Michelle, and relationships are core for a lot of things in our lives. And I also gained some other new friends throughout those years. But when I was talking about loving projects, This was getting a group together, working as a team, and getting something done. Yeah. And I loved that.
Like led it? Like you were that?
I might have led it. I might have been, but with enthusiasm. Yeah. It wasn't because I wanted to boss everyone into their roles, but I definitely might have been the most enthusiastic for the activity. And graduating, going off to university. I know that sounds really fast, but going into university was not the easiest for me.
Did you know what you're going to do?
It took me, I knew I was going into music somehow, but becoming a music teacher or getting a degree in music wasn't feeling right for this imperfect musician. It just wasn't settling. And it was in my second year that I read the word music therapy for the first time in a book. But prior to that, in grade 12, my granny, who had me singing with Granddad, and that continued Friday nights. Like, that was a thing.
No way.
That was forever.
No way.
Missing Love Boat and Fantasy Island on occasion. That was her saying, I've heard of this profession, music therapy. And when I finally read that there was a program in North Vancouver at Capilano University, I forgot this happened until I saw the letter over COVID. Granny wrote a reference letter. Like, can you imagine receiving?
Nope.
Can you imagine any academic institution accepting a reference letter from Granny? And it's such a powerful letter around the years of being in long-term care with all these folk that became my friends.
Like how many years? Like every Friday religious?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, so I'm going to say, until I moved from there, like, it's going to be close to a decade going in. Granddad passed away 8 years in, so it'd have been 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every Friday.
Right.
How do you, it's kind of like,
yeah.
A lot of your friends weren't doing that.
No.
Like Friday nights going to this home.
Going to long-term care, no.
How did it just fill you up? Like, what was it that like kept you going? Because those are interesting years too, as you're trying to figure yourself out. It's like, what kept you going?
Yeah, I mean, my mom kept me going.
Yeah.
There was a level of responsibility for it. I don't want to say that probably every Friday I wanted to be there. No. There was a level of responsibility.
It's fascinating because I don't know anybody that's done anything like that.
Well, and it makes it even more interesting because I said my parents got divorced and these were my dad's parents. And I became estranged with my dad. This was my relationship to that side of the family. And it was my mom that really made this happen. And she didn't have parents that we knew. That she had been orphaned. Yep. So this was really important to her. So yeah, there was this level of, there might have been a bit of pressure there, a little responsibility. But it really, making music felt good. And the connections and you begin to like these people. I don't know. Like I could go out on Saturday instead. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So Granny's letter, how did it hit?
Well, I got into the program, so it must have done okay.
Yep.
Made it through the interviews. I was young. I was 19. Going into being a therapist at the age of 19 is very young. And I can remember them saying that they didn't like letting such a young person in. But it was my years of experience at this point that was compelling. And and Granny just said this was it. So at the age of 19, my career was in play. Yeah.
Do you think that experience was a big part of letting you in as a youngster, like to being 19 and?
Yeah, I do. I think I think knowing that someone had that level of experience within an environment where a lot of music therapy was happening at the time. Right. This was working in dementia care was one of our main training grounds. So it just, I'm sure they just went, okay, let's see what we could do. Yeah.
Do you give that much thought of doing something like that? That seems, you did it without like an end goal. Like there wasn't this thing that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. You did it because obviously it sounds like you loved it. Mm-hmm. There's like family pride and responsibility. Mm-hmm. And then it turns into this opportunity where you get to be an early youngster in this program.
Totally.
That connection piece, like how would you, if somebody's looking to do something, what is that? Like like how do you put yourself in situations where that is in the realm of possibilities?
Yeah. Now I talk a lot about, you can see this through line, but you don't in the moment. Yeah. So I mean, the words like those magic moments or following your instincts and your intuition, I don't even think it was that. I think following feelings has always made sense to me. And I feel those feelings have been quickly anchored to something tangible. I've been very fortunate about that. So, I have a feeling I want to go into a certain career. I know it's not teaching, but I don't know what it is. And then immediately you find a program that you go, and you can anchor to that. Mm-hmm. And I know I was early. I know I'm very privileged that I found it that early. Yeah. Since then, that feeling of the feelings are bubbling first. I often can't express those feelings till they come out of my mouth, and then it's speaking it into the moment or speaking it into the world. That works for me. And I wouldn't say it will work with everybody, but if it is working with you, you know exactly who you are right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I find that thread very interesting because it's like these people. I'm always on this tangent. Like people always see the highlight. They always see where somebody is, and a lot of people like they struggle to find this connection between passion, work, and making money, and it's tough to put all those together.
Yeah.
But to get on a path early and led by just this thing, this playing music to this motley crew, like it seems so random when you're doing it. All of a sudden, the next step's like, oh, this makes complete sense.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So your first year, you're 19, you're in this program.
Yeah.
Is it like, does it click with you?
I hated it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I absolutely struggled in the program. And from there till I graduated, I struggled. And I think part of it was where I was in my life. Again, coming from a family where money was really tight, having to go the student loans, which I believe at the time were at a 13% interest rate, having to commute because I had to live somewhere I could afford and going into a place like North Vancouver. Mm-hmm. So I would commute almost 2 hours in a car every day just to get there. It was totally. And I can remember the day that I borrowed someone's car because my car had broken down. So I borrowed their car, and then their car broke down on the bridge that takes you over to. Oh, like that. And every once in a while you just go, and now all of a sudden, is this meant for me? And the schooling itself, because I was worried financially, and I I felt lonely at that time. Lots of loneliness was just those friends that I had back in high school. You know, I'm now moving on. I'm going forward, and maybe you felt that way too when all of a sudden you're moving into a new direction, but there's that period of loneliness until you land there. That's what this was. And so I was going to school, and because of the weight of just living the backdrop to my life of just, you know, making it through every day financially and with not feeling lonely, maybe I wasn't able to engage in the classwork as much as I could, say, in high school, getting, you know, A's and so excited. That just wasn't motivating for me to do that. I was struggling with the school. But there was one place in all of it where I excelled, and that was practicum. Sending me out on site, working with the people and doing the work, that was amazing.
Were you working during this time? Was that?
Oh, yeah.
That was another.
Oh, for sure.
Added into the mix of all the things.
Had to. There was going to be like, you know, and trying to pay for everything. I mean, 2 hours there, even in the day, paying for, you know, gas and a car and having no resources. I can remember I worked at. I don't remember all the jobs, but it was sort of that, like, what was that when you have like 11 jobs in 2 years, right? But one of them was at the airport, and I was working for a UPS style company. And I can remember thinking, oh, it's so cool learning about, you know, all the plane acronyms. Like it just gave me an opportunity to look at something I would never otherwise have looked at. And
When they they send you into the field and you're like, oh, this is it.
This is it.
Was it just like reconnecting to all the experiences you've had with your in the old person home?
Yeah, and now it's with different population groups. Like I can, and at the time, things have changed a lot. But at the time, there just weren't enough music therapists around to do supervision. So I got some really cool, different styles of supervision. You know, one was. I worked in what was called a psychiatric hospital of the day, and I was right under a psychiatrist. And so a psychiatrist is supervising my work, and I get to make music with people, and the feedback from that psychiatrist was essentially, you know, when psychiatry started, Jen, it was all rooted in the arts, and then it changed into this pharmaceutical world. But it started in the arts because the arts are like pharmaceuticals. And so I got that information really early of, okay, what I'm able to provide people will have similar outcomes to even a pharmaceutical. And that made sense to me, even though we didn't have the MRI machine yet or any of the research around that. And then I can remember one of the practicums was in an alternative high school with people that are essentially my age. So again, I'm 19, 20 years old, and they're 17, 18. Some of them are 19 because they're in an extra year. And here I am, and we are improvising. We're bringing in the drums and different percussion instruments so everyone can participate in doing groups. And at first they didn't want to because, you know, they hadn't done anything. And then all of a sudden everybody's participating and getting the feedback from teachers and principals who are also my supervisor at the time. It's not a therapist, are saying, we haven't seen these kids engage in community like that, and going, okay, all these pieces are making sense. So it was, I had a good time. Right.
How does that happen? Like high school kids, you know, when I think back to like when you're exposed to something and kind of told to try something, you know, there's a lot of apprehension because you don't want to look like an idiot with your peers. You know, there's all these things going on. What is it? What's the unlock around music? It's fascinating because music was, you know, we talked off camera, I DJ'd for a long time. High school, there was no music. Junior high, grade 7, 8, and 9, I played like tuba, trombone, percussion. I think that was it. And that was horrible, like horrible. and then like embarrassed, horrible, like those recitals, you know, in front of everybody. I wouldn't even play. I just like move the buttons. So music left me for a long time, but I find it fascinating. Like, how do you get high school kids to bite into it?
Right. Yeah. There's something common for when, like, if we just think back for a minute to our high school years, like when I was saying it's always feelings first, can you think of a time where you didn't have more of them than then? Like that was a lot of feelings. And although now we're even more strongly connected to our devices, but maybe not. I mean, the Walkman was a pretty big deal back then, right? It changed us.
Yeah.
So we were connected to our devices. Having a conversation about music at school was new. What are you listening to? Why are you listening to that? And then someone saying, "Oh gosh, that sound is stupid," and being able to say, "For you, it might be, but I'm curious, what could it be for this other person?" And starting to get to know people through their music. Drums were fresh, like, you know, talking about drum circle facilitation. I saw that starting to explode during the 2000s, right? But prior to that, music therapists had been using percussion in sessions since, you know, the 1970s. So giving somebody an instrument, claves, 2 sticks, a tambourine, that they may have never been allowed to hold before because they're not part of the music group.
Yeah.
You can engage them quite quickly, giving them an experience that at some level they've always wanted to have. Yeah.
Amazing. Like I just flashed back to those years for me. I'm like, they would have been so interested to be in those rooms specifically, just to like feel that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then where are you off to? What else is happening in this era?
Yeah. Well, the realization that there were no jobs.
So you graduate and then you're like,
there's nothing. And prior to working, to become a professional music therapist, you need to get 1,000 hours of internship somewhere. And I don't remember how I learned of it. There was one person working in Alberta, in this area, in Calgary. Her name was Gail Hayes. I got emotional saying her name. And she had been a student at Capilano, where I went. But she was one of the oldest students they had ever had. Actually, I think she was the eldest student they ever had. She went into the program at 48 years old. And so by the time I would meet her, she would be in her early 50s. And I would be her very first intern here in Calgary. I remember driving here. And I came in the wrong way into the city. I think I had to go to Edmonton. I know, right? Like I came in the wrong way. I know it should be easy, but something had taken me off track and I came through. And the very first main road I traveled on was along Memorial Drive and the Bow River. I can remember feeling very emotional to be here. I didn't know a soul. Gail had invited me to be her intern, and I had a place to live because another student that I had gone to school with, Joan Boyars, and look at all these names coming back. Joan and I went to school together, and she had been living in Calgary, was getting newly married. They were going overseas for a long period of time together and working and stuff. And she said, "Would you house sit?" And I went, "Yeah, that sounds good." So here I was connecting immediately to Gail. I had a place to live. I had a car driving down Memorial Drive. And from that moment to today, everything clicked.
What did it take to actually get here? Like, how long did you have to talk yourself into coming this far? Or was it a pretty quick decision?
It was so fast.
Because there's no other opportunities? You're like, I need to.
No, it was one of those other moments where the feeling came right and it felt like the right decision. And I immediately saw myself driving out here, and I'd never been out of BC ever. I didn't know anything. I don't know. Like, I didn't know anything else existed. You know, you start thinking that is Canada when you live out there. And there was something else, right? And I saw the drive, and as soon as it was realized and I felt it, locked in.
That's it.
Yeah.
That, like, leading with your feelings. Did you know what you were doing back then? Did you know that was kind of like your North Star, like how you made decisions?
No, I think I would have thought everybody had that, did that. Yeah. Yeah.
So once you get here, you knew you're in the right spot. Totally. And then what starts happening?
Well, I complete my internship. I work side by side with Gail. I go to every session Gail does. And
what do these look like? Sorry, I'm very fascinated by what this actually is. Yeah.
So one of the places, I'm going to give a shout out to Glenmorgan Care Center, because that was one of the main places I worked. And Glenmorgan Care Center is, again, a long-term care. It's right on Glenmore Trail.
Yeah.
You can see it from Glenmore as you're going on Sarcee, right in the corner. Mm-hmm. And it was designated I can't remember what we classified it at the time, but we used to just say it was really street. And I say that with absolute love. This is people who are transitioning from maybe other programs. They are like over the age of 40, 45. So some are quite young, but they need a home. They need to be cared for. Many are coming from homelessness and this becomes their home. I remember smoking was rampant throughout the entire facility, and so it was that. It was lots of shooting from the hip conversations. I loved it. Like, I just thought it was such a great place to live, and so mixed. Some people had a little bit of dementia. Some people have had a stroke. Some people just were facing some addictions. And to today, that's a part of what this place is. And but ultimately, it's a care center and caring for people and giving them home and the health care they require.
So when you guys walk in there, what do we do? Like, I have this weird movie thing where you like go into the shared space and everyone's sitting in these like shitty chairs, like conference chairs, and like
that. Yes, there are definitely shitty chairs everywhere and tables with slightly wobbly tables and all the things.
Yeah.
So in this case, it was a lot of individual work. We were given a roster of, say, 12 individuals that had signed up to see us that day. So personal choice. And then we would go to that person's room. You would have your instrument bag and your guitar on your back. And you would go into somebody's room, and it would be often dark and quite dingy. Sometimes there's a little radio that's playing on in the background. Many times people are lying in bed or sitting in one of those chairs that you're talking about. And you knock on the door and you just say, hey, it's Jennifer and Gail, music therapists, and come on in. You would often get because they've signed up. They want to see you. And you'll go in and you first of all ask someone, how's your day? What's going on? And they will tell you, and soon you start finding out more about that. You start on a song. I've been thinking about this song all week. And you start singing that song, and you sing through it, and they either sing along or they might close their eyes. They might be feeling a little anxious. Maybe they've got an appointment coming up. something's going on. And so, we'll work on some breathing exercises with the music and go through that. And then, often bring out this new instrument that maybe they haven't seen before, a cedar flute or something called a tamboa, which is a wood box, like a slit log that has different tones on it, sort of like a xylophone, but contained in this wood box. And you show it to them, and all of a sudden they're holding a mallet, and they barely noticed that they got this mallet and this tone box on their lap, and you start playing the guitar and they start playing the tone box, and there's no more words, and we're just making music together. And again, their eyes might close. Sometimes they might hum along. And then we might talk about how do you want to use music this week? Is the radio working for you? And we'll talk about what station they've been listening to. And maybe there's a group, program at the end of the week, and we'll encourage them to go to that group program. Oh, that sounds so good for you and really, really healthy. And then we do a closing song together, and we thank them for allowing us into their private, personal space.
How do you, when you're done the day, how do you manage whatever you're feeling? I feel like that would be such a exhausting experience day in and day out. How do you manage that? And am I wrong to saying that you're it's exhausting?
It's interesting you're asking that. We just heard from our latest intern today. So this person who's doing their 1,000 hours right now, she is our 53rd intern through our company.
Amazing.
And she was talking exactly the same thing about how emotional it is for the therapist to go in to hear some of these stories, someone's cancer journey, someone who knows that they're end of life, and saying goodbye to their relations and doing it through the music we're writing together. To one of the place that I still work clinically today is in corrections and forensics, and working with some of the things that I hear of when, just like you started, how far back, tell me about the stories of their childhood and the music that was connected to that. So you hear all these things, and we were talking about that this morning, how you will always feel it. Thousands and thousands and thousands of sessions later, you still feel it because you're human, not because you're a therapist. What you learn as a therapist is to never feel it as hard as the person who's actually experienced it, that you are there as a witness, as a to whatever that pain was or to that struggle that they're having. And you're helping to resource them in the moment. You're giving them this incredible tool of music to express all that. And when you become more seasoned, I'm 33 years in now. So when you walk out of that space, it is a lot easier now to go, wow, lots happened. Yeah. And then you move, and then you're able to shift. But your humanity should never leave you. I said should. It should never leave you as a therapist. As soon as it does, it's probably a good time to shift into something new.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did when you're starting off, you're 33 years in, so you have a few things figured out. When you're young, you and Gail walking room to room and seeing all those people, what are the at the end of those days, what are you feeling? A, beside Gail, and then B, experiencing all these things.
Some tiredness.
Yeah.
Because you don't have that emotional muscle to hold it yet. And so you're leaving pretty emotionally fatigued. You're also questioning your skills because you're watching someone like a Gail just know exactly the right thing to do next, and your flow isn't there yet. We talk about that a lot. There is therapeutic flow in a session that shows mastery, and it isn't there when you're an intern, and it isn't there even in your first 2 years. What I learned was really getting in with somebody, with that, when you're sitting there with them, just, maybe this is part of that magic woo-woo thing I was talking about before, but that we call it being present with somebody, authentically you.
Yeah.
So even in my imperfect therapeutic music self, just being all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not hiding or not trying to be something you're not.
No. Yeah.
So you and Gail,
Yeah.
is it like the two of you for like 1,000 hours?
Yep.
So how long does it take to get? Is that a year or like 8 months? Or what is it?
9.5 months it was about. Yeah.
And so the two, you're just riding shotgun with her
Totally.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And
it was me and Gail.
And the perfect scenario for you, like,
I think what was interesting about Gail and I is we never became friends through that. She really was, it was professional. It was learning the job. And the reason I got a little misty earlier is because Gail's no longer with us. So when I left my internship, I actually went back to the Vancouver area for 7 days thinking, I'm supposed to. See, this is when my intuition was off. I'm supposed to go back there and start a private practice because that's where I'm from.
did you feel that or see it? Or were you just...
I didn't know. It's not what I wanted to do. That's when logic came. It just made sense. Yeah. That's where my family is. Yeah. That's where my old friends were. I'm supposed to be out there. And also one of my dearest friends was getting married on a rock in West Vancouver. Can you imagine anything more beautiful? And so I went out there. I was the maid of honor. Do we still use that term, maid?
I think so. I don't know. I might be talking shit, but I'm pretty sure.
Oh my gosh, we need to change that. So went out and I was her maid of honor. I'm standing on this rock and it's during that, and I sang her down the aisle onto the rock. It was all the things. And I can remember I was standing on that rock and I went in the most beautiful place in the world and went, I'm not supposed to be here. I made a mistake. And that has happened to me too. But I fail fast, got back in the car 2 days later, came back to Calgary and started my private practice.
No way.
Yeah.
What do you think what did you feel like that when you said this, I'm in the wrong place? What do you think it was?
Place. Oh,
it was just this like overwhelming sense, or it was just like,
yeah. It was an overwhelming sense, but it was also what I had experienced while I was here. So Gail and I had a very professional relationship, but I was meeting other professionals. I was meeting other therapists, physiotherapists, occupational therapists. I was meeting, I was starting to doing mini presentations for our clients and their families, and even what we call an in-service, which is an education hour to learn what music therapy is to the management. And I had the opportunities to do all those things. And I can remember the feedback was just so positive, but more than that, it was as if they'd been waiting for music therapy their entire care career, that this is a missing piece and we didn't know we were missing it. And that was exhilarating because everything again started to just land for me of, this is what I want. This is, oh man, it's just sounding so cliche and corny, but this is honestly my purpose of being put on this planet, is to bring what music therapy is, what its potential is, to the people who want it and feel they need it. And I haven't looked back.
Amazing. But why do you think it's why the hesitation of like cliche to say it?
To say that it's your purpose?
Because I think, and
yeah, tell me.
I think there's far more people run around this world that could not answer that question and spend a lot of time trying to find the answer to that question. So I think it's almost, it's got to be a relief to be able to say that, like you find your purpose. That's a
yeah.
Very valuable thing to figure out.
I think I also realize that. I think I also realized that not everyone has had it so anchored inside of them as I've had from a very young age. So I feel the privilege of that.
Yeah.
And with that also comes that responsibility of still going Friday nights to the,
For sure.
and the work and all the work.
Oh, the work. Oh, yeah, there's that piece
There's
too.
that.
Oh, yeah. Just don't do what you love and the right work.
Yeah.
The idea to start your own practice, was that, from the minute you went to school, like, did you see a path, or did you always know that was just an option that you had to explore?
I knew it was, by that point, it was the only option.
Because there's not many people doing it at the time. So,
No,
yeah.
I was number 133 in Canada. Yeah. And lots of those 133s were no longer practicing because it was so hard to get going.
What year was this?
1991. I know. Right? Yep.
So you decide to start your own practice.
Yeah.
And does it, what do those early years look like?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that my company's name's JB Music Therapy after my name, Jennifer Buchanan. So obviously I wasn't very creative about it. Obviously I didn't obviously I didn't have a lot of branding, notion about that. And
It's awesome now. Like,
is it?
No, I think so.
We have talked about, oh my goodness, all the jokes, we've said, is there anything else it could stand for, and we keep coming up, with jukebox and, jelly bean. Like we come up with all the terms, but yeah, it's been a name that is stuck. And so what did it look like? Well, I, again, had a moment where I went to the Signal Hill Library in West Hills. I don't even know why that library.
I know where that library is.
You know where that library is?
Yep.
And I walked into Signal Hill Library. Now, the very first time I'm going to be living here as a resident. And I walked up to the circulation desk and I probably had this look of, I don't know what to do. And this incredible woman said to me, how can I help you? And I share this story when I'm talking to other people starting practices because I can remember hearing, how can I help you? And then I was able to say what it was, that I didn't even know what I was wanting, but here's what I've graduated with. This is where what I want to be able to do, who I want to be able to visit. And I remember her following up by saying, I can help you. And there's something about when someone says that to you in earnest, that they can help you, that I will carry for the rest of my life. And I hope that I can offer that to as many people as possible. So she did. She pulled out this blue book. And anyone who's been around Calgary for a long time, we had blue books in the libraries. And these blue books, prior to computers, had the names of all of our agencies serving all ages of social needs, so a full list, and who the executive director was, who the program coordinator was, what the address is, and you weren't allowed to take that book out. And in my case, I didn't have the 10 cents for the photocopy machine, right? So what do? You go in with your piece of paper and your pencil, and you begin your very first business journal, and you write out all of these places that you could potentially introduce music therapy to. And I made 3 phone calls, and the third phone call said, what are you doing Friday?
No way.
Right.
Crazy. That was the start.
That was the start. And what's really great, like what I really love, Jeff, is so many of these clients from the 90s we still see today. So I would go on to maxing out my entire week.
Yep.
With clients within 8 to 9 months. So another internship, and I would max them out. And I would go on the hunt for a music therapist who would come and work. And as it turned out, there was another Calgarian who was graduating from the east side of the city or country and coming back. And she goes, I would love to work with you because I didn't even know what I was going to do because I want to do this work. And she would join me. And that was the beginning. And those first 5 years were lots of clients, but really bad business understanding, and I had to learn a lot on that too.
Do you did you build it organically, or did you keep going back to the library to like get more notes to like fill out your book?
You know, that's so great. In the very first year, it was a lot of going back to the Blue Book for sure. But the best question I learned to ask from that very first place, which was Scenic Bow Legion 104, it was after they had just shut down a huge a center for disabilities. They had just closed. I'm trying to remember what that was called. But they closed it down, and everyone who lived in this institution setting was moved into these beautiful group homes on the Bow River. And so one of those homes was my very first client. And so I would ask them, do you know anybody that you could refer? And referrals were everything. So yes, I would go back to the Blue Book. I would also ask for 1 or 2 referrals from the places that experienced it, so long as they loved it. Hopefully they loved it. And so that's how it grew so fast. And we were able to fill 2 clinical portfolios within 2 years. Like it just kept growing.
And that's a combination of being talented and not a lot of people doing it.
I agree.
Kind of like a...
And I'm going to add in a little bit of luck. Having a little bit of luck of going to the right places at the right time. And a lot of hard work, working daily at it. Daily.
7 days a week?
7 days a week.
Just working?
Just working. Yep.
What was the biggest, I never asked this question, and you kind of alluded to it, but like the business piece that you're like, oh, I better figure this out.
Yeah. So I didn't figure out a lot of it. In that beginning. I mean, at the time it was built on sales. That's what the company was built on. But there were a lot of different elements that weren't in place. Like what was the actual procedure for getting those? Because like you're saying, although I said it wasn't organic, there was a lot of work, but the work was organic, you know? But we had to, if I was going to transfer some of this information to new therapists, I didn't have that. It took me about 5 years to get that. I also recognize that a lot of places, they have different, like I didn't understand reporting, things like reporting. People are wanting to get a report. They're not necessarily telling you they want that, but they actually want to report on how it's going. And it can be even casual over a coffee. So those were the elements of how do I dig deeper into these relationships of not just the clients, because see, this is where it can get challenging. I'm doing the work and making a relationship with the clients, which was the most important part, but learning how to maintain the relationship with the associations and the agencies, that took as much work and greater diligence to learn what that was all about. So, you know, over the years, you start reading books like The E-Myth and Good to Great. And I went to Mount Royal College at the time, Mount Royal College, and they had a free business course during something. And I can remember just totally going to that and being so excited to learn, you know, business terms like a mission statement. Projects, right? Projects. Biggest project of my life.
And you just felt like you had to continually learn that side of the...
Yeah, I still am.
Yeah.
And more about the art of business and about making it for yourself and for what's best for your company. Like how we function is very different than another business is going to run. But there's a common language that we can talk about. Love that.
You touched on something earlier, the 53 interns? How does that even... Does that, do you give that much thought? Like, that's a lot of...
It's a lot.
It's a lot of people that have come through your doors.
Yeah.
Have you been doing it for so long that you're just kind of one of the shining lights in the industry that people want to come?
So this was another thing I wanted to quit, and we did quit for a while. We took interns at the beginning because, like you're saying, it was more that there were very few internship sites across the country, but we felt it was a way for us to give back and to keep building the profession, and that's been a big part of this.
Yep.
I would also go on to become the youngest president of our national association in 1998, and it was really driven home about, if we're going to build this profession, we need to create these internship sites so people can get their certification in music therapy, because you have to have all those pieces. And so that was great. But around the mid 2000s, it was so much work on top of, running the actual work and the sessions and then learning the business, and it was too much. And then, so we quit. We stopped doing it. We weren't going to take any more interns ever again. We did our time. We did our decade, right?
Yep. It's a good shift.
Right? It was good, only good. And so we thought, no, we're not going to do it anymore. And I got a phone call from Tony Wigram, who was unbelievably popular music therapist in the world. And he was calling us from Germany. And he said, Jen. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's this? And he says, I have an intern who I would like to send to your company. We had met at a conference. I'd like to send her to your company. And I was about to say, no, we're not taking any more interns. And he says, I have a workbook for you and money. And I went, wow, a workbook, like something we could actually work through, and money. So we took this intern, and it was unbelievable what those two resources could provide a small business like ours. And there's so much learning in that. So much. Like you want to help a small business, if you've got some resources and tools to share with that small business, it's amazing. So we took this intern, and at the end of it, we created our own workbook that we still use today. I mean, it's elevated a bit, but we still use that workbook today. We still don't get paid to do it. And if anything, we actually will pay a little bit to our interns for coming and joining, because it's hard. That's 9.5 months is a long time. But we created something that was going to work. And we also saw it as a way to do a 9.5-month onboarding of new staff. So the intern I just told you about today, who did her final case study today, she starts with us tomorrow.
Amazing.
Which is awesome.
Was that a calculated move to kind of see, to essentially train, get all the feels from over 9.5 months, and then as you're growing your own business and you have room, like it's kind of like.
Yeah, I would say it's because we've tried all the other ways too, where someone has, been working for 10 years and now you're hiring them and the fit was clunky. You can get that. This eliminates some of those clunks that you otherwise would get. But it also is so inspiring to see this progress of a new music therapist, being birthed into the world. And they're so good now.
Are they?
They are so good.
Why do you say that so like?
Oh, because I feel like when I graduated, I did the best I could with what I just feel there's a worldly awareness, maybe the, computers and the internet and all that. There seems to be more of an awareness of the populations, what people are going through, that they just have so much. Like, I think I was still surprised in all the different environments I went to, but now I don't think those environments are as surprising. Yeah.
Over all these years of doing it,
Yeah.
is there anything that has caught you off guard? Either that, like, or how many things have caught you off, but you've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
You've worked with so many different people. Is there anything that's been like profound? I
shouldn't answer this. I shouldn't say this, but opportunities still catch me by surprise. I mean, sure, there's some things that I'm going out for it, but
Yep.
sometimes that one meeting of that one person and it actually comes into something.
Yeah.
I still am, it's surprisingly familiar, but it's still a surprise. And it feels so good every time that happens.
Can you put yourself in those situations for it to happen more often? Do you give that any thought of like,
Yeah.
do you go meet more people? Do you
Yeah.
do you start following something? Like, how do you put yourself in that?
Yeah. I definitely am in the right circle. Okay. I think what happens when you're 3 decades into a profession,
No joke.
right?
Yeah.
I think what happens is the layers are not just broad, but they do become deeper and things just, so I have stayed in my domain. And in that, I'm often the one trailblazing the next step broader or the next step deeper. And I recognize that. And I do that very intentionally. Like right now, we are shifting into the employee assistance, the corporate wellness world. And we really see music as something that is going to highly benefit people for burnout and resiliency. We totally see that. And we're excited about exploring that. So we're connecting, and I'm connecting with people that have that I know have been there, but they've been a part of our circle for 20 years in some other capacity. And now it's about talking to them about something else.
Yeah.
And plus, this is where Calgary's just excellent. People know people. We just have to say, listen, this is what I'm hoping to do.
Yeah.
These are the people I want to impact. Do you know anyone who can help me get there? And being humble about it. That we might not know everything that we need to know, but somebody knows. And the city has been very good for that.
Day to day, are you still going into rooms and
Yeah.
like this?
So every Thursday I work at the Southern Alberta Psychiatric Forensic Center in Rocky Ridge. I go up to Spy Hill. I started across the street at the what was called the Calgary Young Offender Center. I started there. I've been at forensics for many, many years. And I love that. I also work at Wellspring, which is for people who are living with or families who are living with cancer. And I work there. So one is very much in a treatment capacity, an assessment capacity, and the other one is in a wellness capacity. And I love that for music therapy, that we can do all of it. My staff, between all of us, there's 20 staff. So there's 20 music therapists, and we're seeing about 1,500 people a week, which is awesome. And we're at about 84 organizations. And now we're working with the National Music Center and the Music Therapy Initiative that they've started to help grow more jobs into the prairies, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and eventually across the country.
Crazy.
It's awesome.
Would you have ever seen any of this coming?
No. And probably the most recent one has been the most exciting, which is we're currently at all 4 hospitals, acute care hospitals in Calgary, on so many different units for so many different ages and so many different moments. It just reminds me that there's so much more to do,
Yeah.
And I'm really glad I got that purpose early on because it allows me to put in the continued hard work to get us to wherever we're going to go. Yeah.
You've said it a few times, it's the work piece.
It's the work.
It's kind of, it gets overlooked often, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree.
It's just always on your mind. Is this something you're always just like, it's always there, It's not a 9-to-5 thing you shut off. It's like there's energy allocated, whether you know it or not, there's just energy.
Yeah. And I feel, a lot of the work, when we talk about behind the scenes, what are the behind the scenes? We say it all the time. Those are foundational pieces. We talk about not having any cracks in our foundation. I mean, see, again, more cliches in business, right?
Yeah. Some book.
Right. Some book said those sorts of things. But it really is some of these background things. I'll tell you something that's just come up. This is a great example. So as of April 1st, in order to work in many of the facilities we work, we need, on top of our professional liability and our general liability and our workers' comp, and those are things that private practice therapy groups need and solopreneurs need, we now need cyber insurance. Right? Because of all the break-ins, we need to make sure, and we need to also sign off on ensuring that our platforms that we're using from all the big platforms where we're storing client data and everything, we need to ensure that we sign off that everything is safe and that patient information is safe, client information is safe, health information is safe, all those things. And so we've just gone out shopping for cyber insurance. And I don't know if you've done that lately, but it was shocking, the price compared to all the other, including professional liability, that if something went wrong in a session that we're covered, this is 10 times the price. So it was quite astounding, but a part of our responsibility, some of the work, but doing just even the research into that and to understand cyber and to understand what we can actually implement to keep all of our patients and clients safe. Yeah, it was a lot. So it's that behind the scenes work that ensures that we're providing psychologically safe, physically safe, that all our therapists are skilled up. We're doing our evaluations every year. We pay our clients to fill out a survey. We pay them $5 off their next invoice to fill out a survey to ensure we're always meeting the best that we can do. And that's part of what I love about being an entrepreneur and a health entrepreneur in particular.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How does music fit in your life outside of work?
Okay. So let's talk about that. Yes. So I am not a performer, right? Because I said earlier that I'm not I'm the imperfect musician and the imperfect therapist.
That should be a t-shirt, by the way.
I know. You know what I love to do? I love my songbook that I've put together over the last 30 years. With all the songs that clients have liked. I actually like sitting with my guitar and singing through some of those. You'd think I wouldn't, but I actually love it. And then what I really love to do is go and nerd out as to why that song was written. Where did it come from? I love doing that. I love putting together the keynotes that I put together for conferences and not only sharing about how the different elements of music affect people, the tempo, the tone, but also some of the stories behind the music itself and what we can gain from that in a human way, in an inspirational way. Music is so many pieces for me. And then I love getting out to live music. I love hearing other people that are perfect, that are so amazing, and that they maintain that high level of music expression. I love that. And so many different ways. But yeah, if you ever want to sing through, one of the 487 songs in my songbook, I'm in.
Will you ever do anything with that?
My songbook?
Yeah. Is there just going to be this very private personal thing that just sits there?
I share it with clients.
Yeah.
Okay, here's what's hilarious. Literally, since January, I finally just put my songbook so I can take an iPad around.
Oh yeah, it's digital.
But it's not the same. It's not the same as the 3-inch binder in all the plastic wrap, seeing notes that I wrote back.
You can remember?
Right? Yeah.
What it goes before we got on camera, you were asking about my DJing thing.
Yes.
And I was like, I can't feel it. So when I first started playing, it was records. So I'd pack, like, I don't know, 300 records with me every night.
Right.
And I'd flip through them. And you'd see the label. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, that one. And I'd feel it. And so it's like that very like
That's how
tactical piece.
I feel it.
Mm-hmm. And then digitally, you're like,
I know.
It's
just digital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
way different.
Yeah.
You snuck something in there, the keynote thing. What is that?
A keynote full of key notes. So this is when I open a conference or close a conference.
In any kind of conference, like
Yeah.
any industry?
Healthcare. Yeah. Yeah. I've had the pleasure of speaking at like a tech conference or a safety conference or lots of healthcare, with different domains.
Yep.
And to be able to get up there and share, say, even starting with Granddad's story, how I became a music therapist, but then leading into this is what we've learned about music. And then even sharing exercises from the stage and having people turn to their neighbor and having a brief conversation. And you can just see people lighting up all over. And crafting a presentation is incredibly it's another project, right? I know.
It brings you back to this, like, you're like junior high.
Totally.
Organizing these things.
Totally. Leading the way. Come join me, though. It would be fun. Yeah.
Is it something that just kind of popped up? Or was it something you went looking for?
No, totally popped up. So in order to talk, I was mentioning those in-services back in, even from my internship and then in those first couple of years where I would have to do these education sessions. And some of the people in the room are the executive director or the decision maker, the finance person. And so you learn very quickly that they're going to buy the story because the story is where the feeling is. So you learn how to share that. And it just started growing. And I can remember I think it was in 1998, I got called to do my first keynote. And I thought, what a cute name, right? Oh, they're just asking, but it's an actual term. You get a conference keynote. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I say I do a keynote full of key notes. Mm-hmm.
Just fits.
It just fits. I know.
Does it ever catch you off guard, some of the companies you speak in front of? Like where I'm going is like, I'm kind of curious of what kind of leaders would have a keynote around this idea. I find it fascinating, like makes a lot of sense, but feels like a different type of organization.
Yeah. The healthcare ones make sense. So, for example, having a palliative care conference and then I'm a closing keynote and I can share a story that came out of palliative care. The three that have been particularly interesting is being invited to do a Microsoft 1 hour online during COVID. And they had managers from all across the US coming to that particular meeting to learn about how they could use music with greater intention to help them through the stresses they were feeling during the pandemic. That was found online. That was amazing. A similar one was hearing from WeTransfer. And they asked me to their all hands meeting, which is a morning meeting, but out of Amsterdam. And it was international. And again, we're online during the pandemic and the need. And the other one that has been really lovely was being invited by the FBI to do 2 online presentations for victim services. Victim services, these are the incredible people that are trained in law enforcement, but also counseling simultaneously, and are the first at a school shooting or at a mall thing, and they're there with the victims. So they invited me to do similar presentations, and then they just invited me down for a couple of days. I actually went down there in January and got to work with their people, and it looks like I'll be going down again. And working with law enforcement. What I didn't say early on is when my parents divorced, Mom had to go out looking for work. She hadn't graduated from high school, had never worked because, in the day you just didn't have to, and now she did. And it was the RCMP that hired my mom for front desk, and she eventually worked to being court liaison. And so I had a lot of officers around my life growing up. And then, of course, working in corrections myself, and that's how they found me. So seeing how it's possible that music therapy, the question is there any environment, any context where it doesn't have a potential fit because it's so closely tied to people. It's so close to our feelings. It's about helping all of us feel stronger so we can do the work and our purpose that we need to do.
Beautiful. You're like, it was amazing. This was such a cool one. The minute I met you when we walked in here, I'm like, this is going to be a really cool conversation. Thanks for being amazing. I end the show with one question. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
Well, you've helped me find that today. So Calgary for me is the place and the people that have given me and my business an opportunity to do this purpose. And it was not planned, but man, it's worked out pretty good.
Amazing. Thanks again to Todd for setting this up. And that's what's really cool about this environment is like, after you have somebody on, and sometimes, and when it's a good one, I'm like, do you know anybody? And right away. So it's really, it's kind of lucky that you get in these circles to meet people like you. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
I'm going to be pumped to just stay connected with you and watch what you're up to because it sounds very fascinating. So
thank you.
Thanks.